Sucks. This movie sucks, 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 sucks. Sucks, sucks, sucks. Sucks, sucks, sucks. New movie rant. New movie rant. Hello, everyone. My name is Gurrdie the Devotional. This is Devotional Criticism, and welcome back to the new movie Rant, where when the shaved tailless ape who usually wastes all the oxygen around here deigns to let somebody else have a spot in the limelight, I grouse about recent, new, and up-and-coming film releases and attempt to give you the straight facts about them in my humble opinion. And in my humble opinion, Michael Jackson didn't do it. And I want to be clear here, by do it, I mean I don't believe that Michael Jackson ever molested any children. I've read through the publicly available information, I've watched the documentaries, I've watched the responses to those documentaries, I did my level-headed best to really get down to the nitty-gritty of pretty much every claim or allegation or suit made against the pop star Michael Jackson, from the 1993 civil suit to the 2005 criminal suit to the posthumous documentary Leaving Neverland. And while I can never know for sure, and there's still a lot of such going on behind all of this that falls squarely on the shoulders of not just Jackson himself, but the entire Jackson estate, I just don't believe he did any of that. I think he was just a creep. I could believe whether it's the Chandler family allegations in 1993 or the Francia family allegations in 1996 or the Arvizo family allegations in 2005 or the posthumous allegations made by former Jackson character defense witnesses like Wade Robson and James Safechuck. I could believe every single one of these individual cases was just some ginned-up extortion racket buoyed by a cravenly sensational tabloid media and a criminal justice system that, yes, obviously profiled and railroaded Jackson to a degree that they absolutely never had or ever would do for a white rock star of comparable stature. But when the rubber hits the road, the sword of Damocles hanging over the Michael Jackson legacy doesn't really have any more to do with the tabloid scandal that didn't seem to materially affect him any more than similar or often more heinous allegations have meaningfully affected those same white rock stars of comparable stature. What continues to bedevil his legacy far more is exactly what nobody who is a diehard fan of his music and advocate for his continued public defense wants to acknowledge, which is that Michael Jackson's conduct with legal minors, from those who accused him of harm to those who defend his character to this very day, was virtually indistinguishable from what, with decades of hindsight, the general public is better educated to accurately identify as grooming behavior. That all of the extravagant gift-giving and vacations to Las Vegas, all of the house parties and sleepovers, all of that, oh, you sleep on my bed, I'll just sleep on the floor, all of that stuff wasn't just weird or eccentric or inappropriate, it was predatory. These were not real relationships with informed, consenting adults, and Michael Jackson wanted it that way. He wanted relationships in which he had all the power to say and do things however he wanted to, with individuals who were not, in any sense, mature enough to understand that it is not normal for a grown man to go through all of these lengths to be friends with a child. But it wasn't sexual. It wasn't sexual. Eat my smegma-oozing prolapsed ass and give me a during, because first of all, I don't know if some of you grown-ass adults remember any of your past workplace sexual harassment portals, but there are, in fact, rules of conduct outside of civil and criminal wrongdoing, and one of those is you don't have to intend anything sexual to cause sexual discomfort or harm, and second, of course, it was sexual. What, are you kidding me? No, seriously, you're telling me that the same man who wrote such undisputed pop classics like Billie Jean about a man denying paternity of a child, or Smooth Criminal about a violent home invasion, or Beat It about gang violence, or Dirty Diana about cheating on your girl with an insane star f***ing groupie, or just... Have you seen the Thriller video? My dude literally transforms into a werecat, a predator, and chases down his date. It even literally plays up on the irony of Jackson's innocent image.
I have something I want to tell you.
Yes, Michael?
I'm not like other guys.
Of course not. That's why I love you.
No, I mean I'm different.
What are you talking about?
You don't get to give Jackson a pass to act like he was just some stainless, eternal star child. He knew what he was doing. He knew there was something off about that, and we know that because that is something all reasonable adults of Michael Jackson's age writing music where he clearly constantly expresses his mature understanding of the world and the themes involved around it. He understood all of that. He knew there was something off about what he was doing, and he got off on it. But hey, if you're still on the fence about whether or not Michael Jackson was a mega creep that, despite his totemic financial success and critical acclaim, his public infamy was not just a consequence of some invisible conspiracy, but in fact also brought upon by an obvious consequence of his private motives, conduct, and actions, nothing will persuade you more than the new official Jackson Estate-approved biopic Michael, written by John Logan, directed by Antoine Fuqua, and starring Jafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, in the legendary titular role. Michael chronicles the story of Michael Jackson from 1966 to 1988, beginning when he's just 10 years old, the youngest of 5 brothers, being molded by their dictatorial and viciously abusive father, Joseph Jackson, into a live music act as their only way out of working poverty. The film then follows Michael through the Jackson 5 group's discovery and signing to Motown Records, their rise to national stardom, and inevitably, the inimitably talented Michael's struggle to not only escape from his father's grasp, but to also smash through the lingering racist roadblocks standing between his creative vision and a universal audience that transcends the ghettoized margins of urban black popular music. And I want to stress this before we get any further. About the first half hour to 45 minutes of this thing, all of the stuff when Michael is still a tyke and he's played by the young discovery Giuliano Cruevaldi, that stuff isn't just paint-by-numbers music biopic routine. That stuff is Hollywood cinematic excellence. Director Antoine Fuqua's seasoned career hasn't really ever taken him into terrain like this. He's basically synonymous with thrillers and action, but there's no getting around the deft sensitivity he exemplifies in portraying, with just the right mixture of stark social realism and romantic Hollywood sensuality, the reality behind the mystique of the Jackson story. It's only within the first 5 minutes that we see the Jackson kids packed into a car by their father, taken out to a late-night gig at some dive where they literally sing and dance covers for tips. We see how enthusiastically Michael takes to the stage and the joy it brings both him and his audience. We see how happy and formative this moment will be in giving him that first liftoff into claiming his creative destiny, only for him to come back home and, because his father Joseph, played by an absolutely terrifying Coleman Domingo, because Joseph just doesn't like the way Michael is expressing his joy without deference to him, he's viciously whipped with a belt. This moment of joy, that fire of inspiration and freedom, literally snuffed out in the cruel blink of an eye. There's a lot of criticism going around fairly taking Michael to task not only for when it decides to leave off Michael's story, i.e. before the whole sexual molestation scandal thing, but I would argue that this film's primary crime is simply the same as a lot of music biopics. It shows too much of Michael's career, which stifles its dramatic potential as a study of Michael himself, about what the dramatic core of this movie should be about, apart from music with which we are all so exhaustively familiar. It's not that Michael shouldn't have ended in 1988, it's that it should have ended in 1972, when Michael is still a teenager, when he is still at Motown recording his second solo, but not really solo record, where the heights of his potential are still not attained, where you can hear this kid singing the Hot 100 single Ben, this yearning ode to friendship, made all the more ironic because it's not just a song about a pet rat, it's a tie-in title song for a horror movie sequel about a pet rat that violently defends its master from bullies. Even when Fuqua moves on into Michael's early adulthood, just taking his first real, gingerly solo steps, it's the absolutely brilliant creative choice to keep scoring the film with songs from Michael's childhood that only emphasizes the gravity of that formative trauma, how intertwined Michael's first feelings of freedom and joy are with his father's cruelty, so that these formerly innocent songs are recontextualized as something much more trenchant and heartbreaking and even haunting and, yes, creepy. Weird. It's probably not a coincidence that it's once those haunting calls from the past stop being utilized on the soundtrack that we give over this production completely to a glorified wiki recap of the young adult Michael's greatest thrills and spills, and any and all dramatic tension to Michael goes completely over a cliffside. Anybody attempting to defend this mediocre dreck on the basis of its being some vindication of Michael's legacy from historical ignominy or a top-notch homage to his creative output is full of themselves, because it becomes very obvious very quickly that Michael is a movie compromised precisely by the fact that it front loads us with all of this horrifying intimate detail about the physical and emotional torment Michael suffered, how he basically developed body dysmorphia because of his father's ridicule, especially his big nose, how the wealth and security that his father told him and his brothers would come from their work and loyalty, how all that does is isolate him further from a normal social life, make him more a prisoner, forcing him to escape further into maladaptive adult childhood, adopting undomesticated exotic animals, buying all the new and best games and toys to play with virtually alone. All of which is to say that, yeah, I could see how a person like that would end up being the kind of warped, frustrated people pleaser who doesn't have much in the way of well-adjusted personal relationships and is constantly searching for some kind of fix to his chronic toxic shame, whether it's his features or his relationships. Okay, time to let the cat out of the bag. In case you didn't hear, the production of this film didn't ignore the sexual molestation allegations. They literally wrote and shot an entire last act of this thing that would have taken place in 1993 and dealt with the scandal. But it turns out, in this decades-old clause from a settlement reached between Michael Jackson's insurance carriers who were defending him in the lawsuit, and against his wishes, apparently, that settlement from the 1993 case, it apparently included a clause that said the plaintiff could never use the suit as the basis for any sort of movie. Whoops! Anyway, they had to rewrite and reshoot everything from the last act at the last minute, so now Michael goes from being an incredibly powerful and moving story about, just a compelling character, just this young kid with extraordinary talent and who is just doing all this under such incredible emotional and physical pain. It goes from being that to basically being a typical, predictable, frictionless, paint-by-numbers music biopic that doesn't go anywhere. The experience of watching Michael is akin to seeing a bunch of haunting, obvious foreshadowing of how these formative traumas and shames are inevitably going to lead somewhere, just copping out and not going anywhere with it. And while it would be one thing to not blame this production for not being able to foresee a sudden shake up of their whole aim nestled in some decades-old legal settlement, the problem is that the first act of Michael, the fleeting, conflicted, lost childhood of one of the greatest entertainers the world has ever known, it can only point in one of two directions. One being that this movie is laying out all of the elements of exactly the sort of sympathetic but frustrated personality warped into a life of constant perfectionism and escapism that, with enough stressors, might make disastrous life choices that the one who suffered abuse might, even without meaning to, inflict a shadow of that abuse on someone else as part of a desperate desire to feel some kind of wholeness, some kind of validation, some kind of control, some kind of power. The other being that this same foreshadowing establishes Michael's abuse and control by his father as planting the seeds for him being the perfect victim, the perfect mark, the perfect scapegoat for not just one abusive man, but an abusive and intolerant world, the one that his music is exactly devoted to railing against, again, when it isn't just about horror movies and shit. And there's just no getting around it, folks. Both of those directions are gross. Only one of them is honest, and with their hands tied by the system, the creative team behind Michael has just plopped down in the sand and said, neither. Nah, let's just play the hits. Let's do it. Let's recreate Thriller. Come on, you remember how good Thriller was. Do you want to see Michael Jackson's nephew doing a cover of Thriller? No, because even if I loved Michael Jackson's music with my whole heart, I already have it. I have his art, I have his music, I have his amazing and groundbreaking music video films. You'd better be coming with an A game a little more elite than just doing the same paint by numbers crap that you do for every goddamn white rock star. At what point doesn't it become obvious that this sort of complacent mediocrity is the biggest insult you could make to a master? I don't believe Michael Jackson for a goddamn second would have thought his life would make a great movie, which is why he spent so much of his early creative career portraying characters and songs he was really nothing like.
I have something I want to tell you. I'm not like other guys. No, I mean I'm different.
Michael Jackson wasn't a rumbling gangster. He wasn't some mystic monster under the moonlight. He wasn't a crushing dancehall Lothario. He was a driven and courageous, but still scared shitless little kid who grew up to be a driven and courageous, but still scared shitless and now warped, creepy little man, because that's what his father did to him. In dependable Hollywood fan farming fashion, the actual potential of story to Michael is washed away by the cynical imperative to make an ostensive biopic about Michael Jackson, one where there is, dare I say it, no separation between the art and the artist. Michael isn't important to the vision of the filmmakers because of what he represents apart from his incredible fame and fortune and popular influence. It's not simply a work of legal compromise. It's a work of creative cowardice, one that runs away from truly sitting in the discomfiture of Michael as a human subject, where this is not a story about the Michael we all know and love, but about Michael, just this working poor black boy from a big family who can sing and dance so beautifully and has such a wonderful imagination, who is being held back as a person, as a human being, not just a vehicle for pop records and money, which is how his father was literally using him and what actually made the world cruel to him. A proper movie about Michael Jackson is a movie about someone who shouldn't have to be Michael Jackson, where the whole point is that Joseph Jackson's own megalomaniacal pattern of behavior, the clear ways in which those qualities were echoed in Michael's own patterns of behavior and conduct as an adult, and yes, the clear, obvious ways in which we as an audience socially reinforce that kind of possession-seeking, that control-seeking, that value-extracting attitude, that beneath all of the most superficial stuff that just made Michael financially successful, there is a lingering sense of spiritual poverty that needs to be addressed, where we are forced to confront questions of what would have happened if Motown never discovered the Jackson 5, if Joseph's cruelty hadn't received the reward and excuse of blind chance. Who would Michael be if he were not Michael Jackson? I'm sorry to whoever is still feeling personally aggrieved by people continuing to stress the allegations against Michael Jackson, but, I'm sorry. There comes a certain point where it's fine to say that besides his music, besides his stage talent, none of which are in the film, it's just bland imitation. The only interesting thing about Michael Jackson's story is not what we know he did, but what he might have done. The rest is just a bunch of shit we've seen a million times before, done the best they could have possibly been done by the master himself. I'm giving this cop out a 2 out of 5, and with that, I'm getting the hell out of here.